I'm Anthony Gethers.
And I'm Greg Weiss.
And we are the hosts of Case for Bass.
Hi, this is producer, bass player, guitar player, singer-songwriter, kind of grocery delivery guy, Bill Cinque. Welcome here to Case for Bass.
Where it began, I can't begin to know it, but then I know it's growing strong. If we can't solve any problem, why do we lose so many tears? No, there you go again. When the leading man appears, rise again, like you, mama, you, mama, you. And when I hurting runs off my shoulders. How can I hurt when I'm here with you? No way!
Our guest, Bill, not only a bass player, he actually writes, produces, and records. So some of the shows that he's included are All My Children, Any Day Now, Laverne and Shirley, Once Upon a Time, One Life to Live, Melrose Place, Passion, Sunset Beach, The Young and the Restless. You performed over 5,000 gigs in over 48 states. You were the music director, and bassist for the British Invasion 50th anniversary, and you're the bassist for Neil Diamond, which is how I actually met you through Yuka Tadano. And I'm not even going to bother going through your list of bands. We actually should list who you didn't play with. Welcome to the show. Big round of applause to Bill Cinque.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you for having me. It's when I say it's a pleasure to be here, I'm telling you, this is my favorite thing to do, is these kind of podcasts and these kind of interviews. I love telling these stories. I love meeting the new people. And so I greatly appreciate you folks looking me up. Yeah, and we can say a quick hello to our mutual friend, Yuka. She's a brilliant bass player, and I only met her that one time.
So that was your first time?
Yeah, just to catch up the audience.
Okay.
I did. I was with Neil. I'm going to say I'm still with Neil, even though he's not playing, because I've managed to do a couple of recording sessions in the past few years, even since he retired.
Wow.
He's still active. You know, he's not playing live, but he's still singing in the studio and writing music all the time. And A Beautiful Noise is the Broadway show about Neil's life. I went to see it back in, I guess it was May of 2023.
Okay.
And the show was brilliant. I cried several times. Literally.
Okay.
I was there. It's a good thing I was there by myself, because you would have been embarrassed to be sitting next to me. And so after the show, I met the cast.
Okay.
And, you know, for those of you that might not know about, you know, the theater, everybody leaves and you meet the cast on stage. You don't go back to the dressing room. You're standing on stage and everybody came out. And the band comes out and Yuka comes out and gives me the namaste, you know. And so we talked for a bit. I met the whole band. And what was really interesting for me was, you know, when you're playing, Neil Diamond had hits back in the 60s. And then, of course, for decades after that. So the songs kind of morph when you play them live. They don't sound like the record. Some of them are different keys, or there's different solos. All, you know, they change.
Sure.
I was listening to the band play in the Broadway show, and I'm thinking, well, these guys sound great. There's no two ways about that. But they don't sound like the record. These arrangements are more like what, you know, some of them were more like what we did live. And afterwards, I asked the band, I said, hey, did you guys listen to any of the live recordings from like 2015, 2017, those were the world tours. And the whole band collectively said, oh, yes, like that's all we listen to.
Wow.
And I said to Yuka, I said, well, does that mean that you were learning my bass parts as opposed to the record? And she said, yeah, we were learning some of them from the live thing. And that kind of blew me away because I had never even considered that aspect of it.
Wow.
So I said, so you guys have been listening to me play bass on your headphones before you go to sleep, And I said, I apologize. I really apologize for taking up so much of your headspace. But they were brilliant.
If you were never transcribed, I'm sure you are now.
Yeah, it was very funny, and the band was great. Yuka's great. Matter of fact, I keep in touch with her on Facebook a little bit, and I'll make sure I'll mention you guys now.
Awesome,
thank you.
But yeah, it's a great connection to have.
Awesome. So now let's take it back to this. Did you find the bass, or did the bass find you? And then we're going to actually evolve into when you got involved in the creative writing process, because you're not just a bass player. You're not just a working bass player. You've obviously evolved beyond that. So
okay. Well, Anthony, you asked such a brilliant question by saying, did I find the bass or did the bass find me? And I will have to say it was a bit of a head-on collision that we found each other.
Nice.
Nice.
The reason I say that, we were talking, you guys are New Yorkers. I'm from New York.
Yes,
I started playing music in Westchester, right? I started playing music in Westchester County, which is just north of New York City. And I was in bands that we played all the time. And I was playing mostly acoustic guitar in duos and trios and things like that. And there was an agency that would book the bands. And I did a duo one night as an acoustic guitar player. The next day we go to the agency to get paid. And the guy says, hey, you guys went over really well last night. I think we played a college, Well, you guys went over really well. The band's going to be booked there a couple of times this year. Would you want to join the band? And I said, great, I'd love to. It's more work and more money. And we went through a 15-minute conversation. And at the end of it, there was no mention of this up until the very last sentence was, well, Bill Cinque, congratulations. We're happy to have you as the new bass player. And I walked out the door. I didn't say a word. I walked out the door. I said, I don't play bass. I mean, I love bass. I don't play bass. And the keyboard player said, yeah, I know. I didn't want to bring that up, but I mean, you're going to be fine. So
great story.
I had no rehearsal time. And we were working all the time. And so I will say this with a straight face, and I'm not just being, humble. For about 8 months, I was the absolute worst singing bass player you've ever heard, because I always got the gigs as a singer. As a singer being up front, I could kind of strum a guitar. I didn't have to be a great guitar player. But now I had to be, but now I had to be the bass player. I was like, well, no, this is a whole different deal. So when you say, did I find the bass or did the bass find me? I couldn't even say it got dropped in my lap. I would rather say I got hit over the head with it, right? Because I just got thrown in. But I loved it, and I still love it. And singing and playing bass is an entirely different discipline than singing and playing acoustic guitar. I'm not going to say it's harder, but it's absolutely different.
Well, think in terms of who is it? Does Jack Bruce sing and play?
Yes.
Jack Bruce with Cream.
Played.
Yep,
Huge
Jack
singer.
Bruce,
Yeah.
Sting from the Police.
Paul
McCartney.
Paul McCartney, of course. Phil Lynott. Thin Lizzy. And Doug Pinnick. Doug Pinnick from Doug Pinnick.
Yes, Doug Pinnick we interviewed.
Yep.
Doug,
can't forget about him. So it is
another lefty. Another lefty. Doug Pinnick.
Yes, you're lefty too.
Yep.
Sure.
I'm jealous of lefties. Actually, we discussed this on our last interview with the guy who's a lefty bass player. He plays in the 70s dance tribute band.
Westchester. Oh, Michael Modeste.
No, not Michael Modeste. Rob
Macucci plays lefty.
I've always admired the mirror image.
I play left-handed. I play left-handed and upside down. I don't know if you guys know that. I play
Oh, no, you'd be
left-handed
the
with the low
first.
E string on the
You'd be
bottom.
the first we spoke
Wow,
to about
okay.
that. How did that happen?
Awesome.
How did upside
I
down
was-
happen?
Yeah, I was a little kid, and my brother, who still plays in the New York, Connecticut area, my brother Steve, my older brother, went into the service, and he had a guitar at home, and I just flipped it upside down and started, just tinkering. I never took any lessons. I still to this day don't read a note of music.
Really?
And, yeah, other than like the real simple, simple chord charts.
Mhm.
If you go like up the neck, I always explain it this way. If you go
And
up
you
the
play
neck on the
guitar
guitar,
upside down too?
yeah. If you ever said to me, what note is this, up here on the frets, I wouldn't know.
Wow, but you were able, to
Wow.
make that. You were able to get through your career and not have to worry about not once reading a chart.
Right.
That's awesome, dude.
Dude.
Like I said, with that, unless you really call like the real simple, well, thank you.
No, we're clapping. No, that's a big thing.
That's not even a fake it till you make it. Like you made it.
You
just
made
gotta
it
steer
faking
through
it.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
But it's not faking it. You do music. You must have an incredible ear.
Well, I have said this many times. I have a great collection of friends who are all fantastic musicians. I'm sure you guys do as well. And my really good friends are these great bass players. And everybody says the same thing. They read, they can teach, they can write out music. And all of them say the same thing, where it just comes down to, if you can do it, then just do it. It doesn't matter how you get there. And, I have always said that my talent is not in my fingers. I'm not a chops guy.
Okay.
I know chops guys. I'm not one of them. Now, I don't say that I'm not like an aw shucks guy. There's a lot of stuff I do well. What I'm the best thing at, I'm the wing it guy. If you guys are stuck in a bar and the bass player couldn't make it at the last minute, I'll jump up.
I'm using that. I'm a wing it guy. I know what you
I'm a
mean.
wing it guy.
It's just all ears.
Anthony's a wing it guy too.
I'm a wing it guy.
It's we know where things are, we know where things move, but you need to anticipate where the bouncing ball is going.
Absolutely.
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. I think Miles Davis was the famous one who said, "I'll play the note and tell you what it is later."
Yes.
I don't know, when somebody says to me, "Oh, when you did that augmented thing," I go, "I don't even know what an augmented thing is. I kind of know what you're playing. I know what you're talking about." So that's been my whole life and continues today.
Wow. All right, let's talk about.
That's just the way I do it.
Awesome. Let's talk about growing up. So when the bass finally hit you in the head, when did you learn to fall in love? Like, what was your first bass that you really gravitated to, that you said, something, this is my instrument of choice and I love it, and this is going to be my lifelong piece? What was that first bass?
Well, there have been a couple.
Okay.
But the very first one, and I say this with great pride, I don't get paid by them or anything. I had an Ibanez bass that was not very expensive. And I bought a PV bass amp, which was not very expensive.
Okay.
And I would walk into these highfalutin clubs and we'd be the opening act. And I don't want to mention the names of any bands, but all the bands you would know. And I would be the opening act, opening for the guys that had hits on the radio.
Okay.
They had a road crew, and I was walking in with a dolly with all my stuff on, right, where no one helped me.
Okay.
I had people snickering at me.
Really?
Because I had, this less expensive stuff. And I've had sound men come up to me afterwards and say, "These guys are wondering how you got such a great bass sound out of that stuff." I said, "Well, because it's ears, right?" Now,
Your hands.
I did graduate. I'm a 4-string guy. I have a 5-string. I have a fretless, and they're essentially coat hangers. I have my shirts draped over them. I'm a 4-string guy. I don't do a lot of effects. The Fender Jazz Bass. I have a stock Fender Jazz Bass, American.
Hold on a second. We're not worthy.
We're not worthy. You mentioned Fender DNA, and that's who we are. We do.
Yeah.
We stick with tradition.
Yep.
Yeah. But there's a great company, you guys might be familiar with it, kind of a boutique company called Modulus.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
Graphite
absolutely.
Next.
Yep.
Yeah. So I had a Modulus for years, and I loved it. And I played it on the first Neil Diamond tour. I had that in my Fender. I'll tell you just a quick side note. The wonderful bass player, his name was Riney Press, and he
yes,
recently passed away, sadly, last year. But he was Neil's bass player for
all the albums.
45 years. Yeah, he's brilliant,
All the albums.
Okay.
And he had, the 5-string, the fretless. He had an upright. He had pedals. He had the old Taurus pedals, the bass pedals that you played with your feet. He had that. Now here I come, the new guy. I have 2 4-string pedals. That's it. I mean, I have 2 4-string basses, 2 4-string basses, pedals. No pedals, no nothing. Just so the crew loved me. Then I'm dragging all that stuff around. But Modulus were kind enough to actually make me a bass.
Wow.
Really?
Custom made, upside down, left-handed. And it weighs a lot less than the old ones. One of the bigger issues was that they were really heavy. And they made me this one that I use almost every night. And it's modeled after a Fender jazz bass. So that's my bass of choice, whether it's the standard Fender jazz bass, which I love, and the Modulus, I think they call it the VJ, which is the vintage jazz bass.
Okay.
And that's what I use.
Can we ask strings? What are your strings of choice?
Sure. Well, if I've been playing bass since 1986, which I think is about right.
Same set of labellas. I'm reading your mind.
Well, Rotosound is most of the time. Yeah.
Sorry, Greg.
Well, but the labellas is the second. Yeah. When they don't, I used to buy Rotosound by the case, but the funny thing was I never changed my bass strings. I rarely changed them.
You're the second guest who said that, actually. That they don't.
I change them. There's a great guitar luthier here in LA, Eric's Guitar Shop in Van Nuys, if anybody's in the area. I take it there to get set up about twice a year, depending on how much I'm playing. I maybe change the strings once a year, but not much. I'm sure I have a couple of basses in there. I use 3 that I rotate.
Budge, right? I mean, the neck doesn't.
No, it goes nowhere.
Budge. Yeah,
not at all.
Graphite. Where's it going?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have certainly gone 18 months without changing strings.
Okay.
Professionally, gigging and the whole thing. That's amazing.
Are yours flats? Are they half wounds? Are they rounds?
Well, for the most part, I just use the round wound. I do have another custom-made bass, which my good friends at Gretsch made me a hollow body, upside down, left-handed, what they call the Electromatic, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
It is, first of all, just to look at, is the most incredibly gorgeous bass I've ever owned in my life. Okay. And I play it, I'm not much with a pick on bass, but I play this, I do a lot of Beatles stuff. It sounds more like a Hofner than a Hofner is if I.
Well, that was my next question. Yeah. Did you buy it for the reason? Did you get it for that reason alone, for the Hofner sound?
Kind of, because I have a Hofner and I love it, but this is a little more versatile.
It's not really Hofner ring.
Yeah.
Who did we hear that from? We had a guest that went and got was it a custom made Hofner that literally was built tougher, stronger, more versatile with, hotter pickups to really get more Hofner than what a Hofner was actually putting out.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, I know the people at Hofner do a great job making their instruments, but this particular one made by Gretsch is a bigger body, and it's just, I love it. I love it for that particular thing. A matter of fact, just tying this together, I'm just realizing it as we're talking. I was fortunate enough to do a couple of the Neil Diamond records, not the hits from the 80s. I wasn't in the band back then, but in the last 10 years. And I'm pretty sure I used that Gretsch hollow body because they just loved it was just so full. It didn't. It took up a lot of space, but not too much space.
Okay. Awesome. What were you listening to growing up? Like, what influenced your bass playing?
I'm probably going to be really typical when I say this, but at 65 years old, the Beatles changed everybody's life, right?
Yes.
And I do remember, I don't even know why I remember these factoids, but the Motown stuff was in my blood. And when you hear about guys like James Jamerson and,
hold on a second.
Yeah.
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Oh, that's me. Yeah. I'm not saying I play like them. And then, the lesser known, but kind of equally important, Bob Babbitt was the other guy that played all, the bass. They didn't even know who played sometimes. They didn't even know which take they were on. But those guys I remember being a little kid listening to bass lines. And I can't even explain why.
That's okay. We understand, though. You don't have to explain it. This is the case for bass.
This is very therapeutic being on this show. I'm realizing that.
Well, the question I have, because not as known bassist on that many recordings as you, but when I was taking what I said to Yuka was, when was your deep dive? Like, when did you put on a Motown record, listen to a song 300 times and go, what's he doing on this thing that is making it unique, that I need to know this part. I need to know this riff. I need to know where this passage is taking me. And did that ever happen for you? And what song was it?
Okay. I can answer that with about 7 or 8 different songs, but
yeah, I understand.
Great song. If you're familiar with the Motown classic Bernadette.
Of course.
By the Four Tops.
Of course. Okay.
When you hear that bass line, I feel like walking in the other room now after we're done and just like playing it before I run out the door. Another bass player and I guess band more than song. Joe Osborne.
Oh yeah.
Is a guy who played on a million things. And let me tell you, for all the hipsters out there, I would really strongly suggest listen to the old Carpenters records.
He discovered her.
Yeah, Joe Osborne was playing on some of that stuff. Joe Osborne also played on like Simon and Garfunkel.
Yes. Yeah. And Fifth Dimension.
Yeah, all that. And so when you listen to things like the Carpenters, and for some people it's like, oh, that's kind of light. It's kind of, it's a little on the smarmy side, I guess if you want to call it. I have loved the Carpenters since I was 7 years old. And when I started listening and taking those deep dives, there's no 1-4-5s in there. There's no simple progressions.
Right.
No.
It's arrangement.
They're brilliant. Yeah, they're brilliantly composed.
Brilliant arrangements. That is true.
It's arrangement. I mean, one of the things that I bumped into, and I'll admit this, the dorkiest songs have the coolest bass lines.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I mean, like, people go, what do you like? I go, I really dig Diana Ross, because you listen to even these slow songs, but the bass is really churning the waves underneath it. And it's making all the mood come alive because it's the bass. The bass isn't interfering with all the other audible parts. And, it's just that there's these songs, like, listen to the Partridge Family. I mean, it doesn't end. You're on TV. You could even emulate this because you were there.
Well, if you ever look at the credits on those Partridge Family records, they're the best players in town.
Absolutely.
And the Wrecking Crew,
yes,
which are
we're not
I'm happy to say,
we're definitely not worthy.
No, neither am I, and I work with those guys now. I'm Don Randy. If you know who he is, he's the keyboard player on all of that stuff.
Yep.
Wow.
And Don Randy, and I will be very clear on this. Don Randy, I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's older than I am. Plays as fast and as accurately as anybody you'll ever hear.
Wow.
And he hires me, but when he hires me to sing, because he has a couple of other bass players in his Rolodex. He doesn't really need me to play bass.
And that's the rumor on Will Lee too, is that Will Lee gets hired for his voice more than his bass.
Yeah, well, Will Lee does a great thing. He's I've even spoken to him a little bit about this. I don't know him well. We've met many times, but I don't know him.
Mhm.
But he'll do like a kind of a seminar thing, and he'll play a bunch of fast, like funky things, and he'll stop and go, "Okay, I'll make $75 doing that, but doom playing a groove. I make $500,000 doing that. So you guys make your choice. You know, you want to be you want to be the show off that plays, that plays as many notes as he can. That's a whole different thing. But Will Lee is an incredible singer, absolutely incredible singer.
His sense of universe is like, he adds to it.
Part of the Fab Four, the Fab Four.
Yes, he is. He's in the Fab Four.
Well, those guys will blow your mind if you ever see them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, they're local here.
What you're looking at.
They used to be they don't play as much since the COVID thing, and they all went bi-coastal with all their gigs. But when they were hot and rambling, they were doing 50, 60 shows in the area.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
it's so funny that you mentioned the idea that Will Lee said, if you play your fancy notes, you get paid $75. I can do the do a simple groove and make
500,000.
Yeah. But the funny thing is that Victor Wooten once said he was doing a seminar, and he doing he did the intro for My Girl. He went doom 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 doom, and he said, notice that everyone started clapping right away. So you do 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 do. Now then he threw in a little bit of a crazy look, and everyone stopped. He goes, I now just lost my job because you're never going to call me back ever again. He's like, the fact that everyone in the audience stopped, the producer's like, don't bring this guy back ever again. And he stated that you're never going to get work with all that fancy stuff, because he called it basically it's musical masturbation. You look impressive, but you're not saying anything to move your audience. So, very strong point that you mentioned there with Will Lee's statement.
Yeah, well, I've had the extreme pleasure of working with a lot of people at the same time. And we did a short tour. We played in New York a bit. I think it was 2 years ago. Peter Asher is a great producer.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
And so the band was called Peter Asher and Friends, I think. And
was that a record?
No.
I remember.
Was it a show? There was. Okay.
We were traveling with it, and Leland Sklar was playing bass.
Wow.
We're not worried.
Now,
we're not
when you talk about how many recordings Leland, that's ridiculous. We're driving in the car and a song comes on and I go, oh man, I love this. And Leland goes, yeah, I remember when we recorded that in 1986. He's the greatest guy, the funniest guy ever. I love Leland dearly. And so the reason I mention him is we were in a band where it was the great Albert Lee playing guitar. If you guys are familiar with Albert.
Oh yeah.
So it was Albert. It was Albert, my great friend, my musical partner, my work wife, Jeff Allen Ross, who was the guy who played with Badfinger back in the 80s, and now is doing all these other stuff with us. And Leland was playing bass, so I was just playing like acoustic guitar, and then Albert was obviously the featured guitar player. So I would say to people, I've never been so honored to be the second best bass player and the third best guitar player in the band. I mean, this is,
that's great. That's great.
So when you play with those guys, and to say nothing of the fact that Peter Asher is fronting it, who not only had hits on his own, he was a pop star on his own.
Yes.
Then became the biggest manager in the world, and then the biggest producer in the world, and still is music supervisor for everything from the Grammys to how many movies, the Pirates of Penzance and all those things. He works with Hans Zimmer all the time. So it's easy to keep your ego in check when you're around these guys.
Oh,
you get in the car with these guys, everything on the radio is by one of them.
Wow.
But that has to take a lot of pressure off that instinct to have to try and turn it on as opposed to contributing. Yeah,
well, you know what it does? It's your role suddenly becomes very well defined.
I'm good.
Right, and that's the best way to say it.
Essentially, as opposed to questionable.
Yeah, because when you're playing a club gig, let's face it, I'm playing an acoustic duo for years or a trio, and you play some Elton John song. Well, okay, I guess I'm taking the saxophone solo on the acoustic guitar because there's no sax player. When you're in this kind of an environment, you just do what you have to. You're doing your role. In my role was essentially being like the big voice, the bigger voice. A little bit of acoustic guitar, and then just generally sex symbol.
Nice.
So 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3.
Someone's got to do that.
Yeah.
Unless they're into big bushy beards.
So yeah, but it's a great environment to be in because it just keeps you. It really keeps you on track. You just do your part. Don't worry. Everybody else is covered. You don't have to tell anybody else what to do.
I'm gonna ask a question, and it's a question that Anthony always asks, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. It's the big studio show up and record versus what turned into the home studio recording. How you literally phone it in, and since you've been on both sides of that, I'm assuming, can you talk about all the changes that have happened to you by that happening?
Yeah, I remember being in Queens, New York in the 80s, and I had a couple of friends that had home studios. And that was unheard of. You had 150 musician friends, 3 of them had a recording studio. And as you got a little older and you refined your talent and you found your way into the bigger studios, the big studio environment, there's nothing like it. For me. When things come back to the laptop, I very often opt out, to be perfectly honest. I am recently, is it okay if I give a couple of shout outs? Because again, I'm not.
Absolutely.
Go
right ahead.
There's a great guitar player out here in LA by the name of Brian Pothier. Okay. Brian and I toured all over with Peter and Gordon and Denny Lane and all those guys, all the kind of oldies acts. Matter of fact, on that 50th anniversary British Invasion tour, Brian and I were essentially co-musical directing, if you will. Nice. Brian has a great studio in Orange County, which is about 30 miles south of LA. I was there a couple of times this week. It's the perfect happy medium between the big studio and the small studio. It's still a live studio. It's still a live room, but it's controlled environment. It's automated and computerized, and everything about it is great. The reason I say that is because the big studios, there's a lot involved in doing a big studio. Like what constitutes a big studio? What constitutes the need for a big studio? Do you have a 12-piece band? Are you going to play everything live? The expenses, can be crazy. And to offset that, some just go in the box, as they say, and just use a computer. I can't go that small. I'm not comfortable. Frankly, I don't know enough about computers to do it myself. I'm insulted by a lot of what some people call music, only because I know that they didn't create the music. They hit a button. I work with people that literally take things off the internet and say, okay, there's my rhythm track. I'm just going to sing lyrics over it.
They recompose.
So yeah, I'm not, as I like to say, it's, there's composing and then there's decomposing, right?
It's decomposing.
I call that decomposing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're dying.
Yeah.
So I still have the opportunity to go to the big studios now and again. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you were looking for this segue, but just 6 months ago, not even 5 months ago, I got when I say chance of a lifetime and the dream, I recorded at Abbey Road.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
If you guys are British Invasion fans, and if you're Beatle fans, and Lawrence Stuber is the guitar player from Wings. He was like the last incarnation with the guitar, as a guitar player, lead guitar player of Wings.
Did
Lawrence
did he
co-produced
replace?
this.
Did he replace Denny Lane?
No,
No, actually,
well,
they worked together. They
So they
worked
worked
together.
Okay.
Yeah. I played with Denny for God rest his soul because we were dear friends, and he passed away just a few months ago.
That's right.
But
Recently.
Denny and Lawrence were in the band together.
Okay.
Back to the Egg was one of the great records with all those, all those hits.
wow.
So
Yep.
Lawrence produced Billy J. Kramer. If you remember Billy J. Kramer from the 80s, from the 60s, he was
60s,
celebrating his 80th birthday, had the party at Abbey Road Studios, and then we spent the next 3 or 4 days recording his new album, which just came out last week, and there's a single.
Oh wow. Oh
yeah, it was.
We'll definitely help
Look that
push
up.
that.
Oh, please do. It's wonderful, and the
100%.
video's great. Yeah, it was Lawrence Juber was co-producing it with another good friend of ours, Jeff Perholtz, and they did a video for it that is absolutely mind-blowing. Jeff and his wife Misty did the video, and it's brilliant. And if you just look it up, just look up Billy J. Kramer and his new release, and everything about it was great. And it was, here I am sitting there with headphones, with my left-handed bass in the corner of Abbey Road Studios. And we're in the middle of a take and like, okay, let's try that again. And let's do this. And I need more of this and a little bit of less. And I'm being very professional and very studious. Like, yes, okay, I got it. And all of a sudden I look up and went, I'm here. I can't believe that I'm actually sitting here.
Okay.
And I had every photo in my head of all the Beatles in this room.
Wow.
Everything that we've all seen. And I'm sitting there going, I'm sitting right here.
In the
And
room.
in
the room.
You kind of had to.
You literally had a pinch yourself moment where
You're breathing the air.
I really, really did. I kind of had to go, okay, you're going to have to put this on ice for about 60 minutes until we finish this. Then I can jump around the room and dance naked if I want. But let me focus.
I mean, all the great records. I mean, you talk about Dark Side of the Moon. You're talking about, history.
Oh
on
yeah,
every note.
So, when you ask me about the difference between the big studios and the small ones, I've been in a couple of the big ones, and there's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it for me.
Okay, awesome. What do you see? Do you see yourself when you talk about the idea of recording studio, playing live, and then you've done composition or recordings for TV as well?
Mm-hmm.
How did you transition from being the working bass player into composition?
Well, when I'm composing, which is funny, composing is like the 25-cent word, right? When I'm writing songs, that's the more.
Sure.
I don't want to sound like I'm John Williams, Most of my composing has gone this way. I write songs. I write them about girls. I write them about cars. I write about the weather. I write a song. I have a publisher who I've been working with for more than 25 years. And the publisher is the one who places the songs on television. I don't go to, CBS and knock on their door and ask them to listen to something. It goes through the publisher.
Publishing house handles that. Yes.
Heavy Hitters Publishing, by the way. I want to give credit to everybody I can because they've been wonderful to me. And every once in a while they would say, okay, we like that song. We're going to try to place it. The Young and the Restless has been my best friend. I don't work for them. I don't work for them per se, but they have used so many of my songs. Every time I meet somebody,
you wrote Nadia's theme, right? Is that
how I wish? Yeah. If I wrote Nadia's theme, the three of us would be doing this interview on my private jet. But yeah, The Young and the Restless has just played many of my songs. And the people at Heavy Hitters once in a while would call me and say, that, song number 3 that you wrote, we like that style, but we're looking for something in that style, but maybe a little more modern sounding, or we're looking for that kind of vocal range, but we want a ballad, or we want a saxophone solo. They would give me these kind of parameters and I would write it. And then it was their job to find a home for it. So when I'm writing, sometimes it's with a target. Sometimes it's with, yeah, it's got to be a dance song. It has to sound like the 80s. And other times they'll ask me, do you have anything that sounds like the Righteous Brothers? And I go, yeah, here's this. You know, I have this. I wrote this 3 years ago. It's very kind of scattergun. It's a little haphazard. There's no real recipe. And I've done a lot of co-writing. And that's worked out well, which I honestly love that, because I have co-written a lot, and it has been not only money making, but it's been satisfying because it pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit. You're writing with someone else. Suddenly, you know, it's like a bicycle built for two, right? You both have to pedal at the right time. You don't have one guy hitting the brakes.
Figure it out. That's the thing.
Yeah. But it's
real music. You're not relying on what isn't there to, you know, put it together.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and a lot of it's vibe, you know, a lot of it's just, hey, this feels good and it sounds good. Is it Shakespeare? No. You know, is it Beethoven? No. But I play it and people dance. Okay, well, there you go.
Okay.
Right. I play it and people sing along. I play a ballad and you watch people hold hands, and I go, okay, well, I'm doing something right here. You know.
Yep.
So it doesn't really come from one source. I pretty much take a piece of paper and a pen. I don't have home recording stuff that I make a demo. I literally sketch it out with pencil and paper, and then take it to a studio. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Have you been asked or approached to discuss or comment what they're calling the effects of AI on music creation? And have you seen any?
I have, and I kind of bite my tongue because I don't know enough about it to do a dissertation. I kind of feel like the guy who drives a car but doesn't know what's under the hood. You know, I just know it starts and I drive. I don't know enough about AI, but I do know some of it I find very disturbing. Because I mean, if you walked around my house right now, there's a guitar on the couch. There's a bass in the spare bedroom that isn't even in the case, right? I walk around all day. I have pieces of paper all over the place. I'm constantly writing. I'm constantly perfecting. I'm constantly honing. I'm constantly tearing it up. What I loved last night, I hate this morning, and I tear it up and start all over again. The idea that somebody sits down and goes, bing, 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 okay, I have a song, I'm just going to touch it up. That's an insult to me.
Well, it's an absolute insult in that way, because there's no, a buddy of mine made an observation I used to work in hip hop many years ago, but I also used to play bass and play guitar for the producers that couldn't get clearance on the samples. So I would do a modified version of the tracks, but you had to know music to make it work. Right. You had to have basic understanding of music, where these young producers these days, everything is, like, if you say to them, do this in 4/4 time in the key of C, they look and go, what the hell's that?
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So the whole concept is disturbing. It really, really is.
Well, I mean, I always look at it. Maybe I'm just old and bitter, but
losing your career.
The example I try to give to some of the younger folks that I sometimes work with, I'll say, if you picked up the newspaper tomorrow and looked at the sports section, and you said, LeBron James scored 35 points last night, and then said in the same game, Bill Cinque, scored 45 points. Someone would look at that and go, wow, this guy, Bill Cinque, I guess he's better than LeBron, right? Because he scored that many points. And then you look into it further and you go, oh, no, the only thing is Cinque had a trampoline and a stepladder on the basketball court that the other guys didn't have. Okay, that's cheating, right? I have a huge advantage. That's the only example I can use. It's like, no, yeah, it's the same ball and it's the same hoop, but I'm 15 feet above everybody else. How can you expect anybody to compete with that in the real world? When all you're doing is using technology, that means everybody that we know, that whether they went to school or taught themselves or the idea of me coming home as a young adult, working a day job or coming home from a gig, and at 2:00 in the morning, grabbing a sandwich and sitting out on the couch and finishing that song that I was writing in the car. That's the blood, sweat, and tears I put in. And when I hear that somebody sat there in 15 minutes,
Yes,
and again,
yes.
as Anthony just said, doesn't even know what 4/4 and C means, and took out a box and hit 4 buttons and created a song, that's cheating. That's me playing basketball with a trampoline and a stepladder when the rest of you are down here. I don't like the idea of it.
And there's no need for you to run down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's scary that it's not going away soon. Unfortunately.
Well,
yeah.
If I could interject and say, I think the opposite of that's happening. Like, since we started the Case for Bass, we have an Instagram feed, and I'm scrolling, and you like one bass player, and now you're blasted with 50 bass players. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to a child overseas who's playing a Charlie Parker sax flurry, mm-hmm. and he's copying this sax flurry on the bass, 6-string bass, high register, pure rip, incredible. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying to myself, well, where's the bass line? Where's the improvisation? Where's the feel? I won't be disparaging, but we call that a copycat parrot. And the next flip is someone doing something else, or it's some kind of slap flurry. And what I notice are 2 things. One is they're always by themselves, mm-hmm. and they're playing underneath what you were talking about before, these pulled out, chord patterns.
Right.
And they're predicating, this bass solo on, I don't know what. And I guess it's shock value and attention, but if you've seen these things, is that bass playing?
It's a good question. It's a good question. All the bass players that we're talking about that are successful, and granted a bit older, because that's what it took to be successful. They're older now, but when they were 30, they were making these records that we're still listening to. The umbrella that I put it under is this: if you're playing an instrument, you need to have something to say. And Chuck Berry was loud and clear, 3 chords, loud and clear. Love it. He had something to say. When we talk about the Carpenters being really just majestic and just, huge arrangements, they had something to say. James Taylor, one of the most underrated guitar players in the world, ask all the great guitar players to play a James Taylor song.
Right, and they can't touch it.
They panic, right? These guys have something to say. It's not just hitting the notes. It's what instrument you're using, how you're approaching it, the lyric that matches the melody, that matches the vibe of the song, the whole thing. You hear somebody's blood and guts. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen with synthesized music. That's not going to happen in the box, And so,
no, it's not.
Like we were saying, it's not about playing fast. It's not about playing the most expensive instrument. We've actually covered that in this broadcast, right? But when you put it all together, it is a soup, right? I mean, there's got to be more than one ingredient. You have to have. You've spent, Anthony, you said you spent time in the theater. You go to a Broadway show and you see these singers. It's not that they're technically perfect. They're singing in the context of that musical, and you sit there and cry. The guy he's going right to your soul. He's speaking to you. He has something to say, and he's transmitting, and we're receiving, right? There's no need to take that performance and say, oh, you were a little flat or you're a little sharp. Who cares? The guy's he's putting it in, And when I get that thump in my chest, whether it's an opera or a young kid at an open mic night, or the James Jamersons and the Will Lees and the Leland Sklar bass players, when you feel that thud, that you just know they struck a chord in you, that means they're communicating with you. I don't get that thud from the pre-packaged cookie cutter AI stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was quite a rant on my part. I'm sorry.
No, it was a good one because I mean, like, you know, I always hear things and want to jump in, but one of the things was the social aspect of it was that you created a sum greater than the parts by playing in combinations of artists that created music.
Sure.
And now if you could put 7 out of 8 parts from a computer screen, and now you're adding this part that's you, it's not necessarily what you would call before the Carpenters or, you know, or the Jackson 5 or the Temptations or, you know, any one of these artists. I mean, look, Peter and Gordon were nailing it as a duo.
Yeah.
I mean, there was much more behind it, and it just became a very popular, you know, communication in music.
Yeah, everything you're saying is right on the money, and what it does is these conversations can be very divisive, right? Because if there were a couple of 15-year-olds or 20-year-olds sitting on the other side of the table here,
oh, forget it, we're shut off.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
well, yeah, I mean, you know, they have their opinions, and I don't ever want to sound like I'm talking down to somebody. All I'm just saying is, there's a guitar and there's fingers on the guitar. That means you're going to have a couple of things happen. There's going to be it's going to be a little out of tune. You're going to hear the humanity of flesh fingers on steel strings, right? It's not about being perfect. You're going to hear when B.B. King bends a note, it's the greatest note ever.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
It's the guy. It's the guy. I mean, you know, it's not the guitar, and it's not a sample, and it's hard to explain that to somebody who has never experienced it.
Or
well, it's hard to
That's
explain
when
to
we're talking to
someone.
the youth.
Yes, and unfortunately, if they were born after, I'd say 95, they're used to the idea of computer technology. Like that's something that they're just used to that, and that's all they know. Now, for Greg and I, our time was primarily in the 80s, so we were used to the era of the Eddie Van Halens of the world, your Louis Johnsons, your Verdine Whites, your Jamie Jameson, your Leland Sklars. I mean, these are
Geddy
people
Lee.
that Geddy Lee from Rush, Chris Squire
Sure.
from Yes, Jack Bruce, of course. We grew up with that, so this is what we were accustomed to that. And I remember meeting a guitar player who once said to me, he goes, the guitar is just a piece of metal. It's just wood with some metal strings or nylon strings, whichever one you prefer. A couple of metal knobs, some metal hardware. But once you grab a hold of it, you grab a hold of that instrument, it now becomes an extension of your emotions.
Right.
And just hearing that, I was like, that's so cool. That one line kind of put it all in perspective for me. So, and I also realized that in today's world, even though you have AI, you still can't, I don't think AI will ever replace a live performance. People still want to see humans perform. They still want to see a band. You know, I don't seeing some robotic musical director. I'm not sure if that, it's like watching the Jetsons and picturing the maid dressed in like I can't remember the maid, but or like
I mean,
just picture her like doing like directing a musical chorus.
Every year
of
they
other
have the
musicians
Super
with
Bowl.
robots.
Every year they have
What's
the
that?
Super Bowl, and at the halftime show they have 1,700 dancers, and they got a 5-piece band.
Right.
And somehow they're spending 9 months coordinating an 8-minute show, because you need 8 minutes to set up, 8 minutes to perform, and 8 minutes to scrub it all off the field. And a lot of the spectacle is in the visual, not necessarily the audio, which, you know, an old friend of mine who was trying to explain that to me was that he looked at me as like mid 90s, and he's like, you know, music is just becoming part of just a visual at this point.
Yes.
And it, you know, this was a really gifted B3 player, played all over the world. He played with Ashford and Simpson, and he played with Joe Jackson, and he played with a whole bunch of people. And it would get him discouraged because the visual used to be watching the hands of a B3 player.
Yeah.
And watching the magic come out, and how a lot of that deteriorated into the music video process. And even though the whole market got bigger, it took away from the art of making music. So,
yeah, well, you know what we did was in the 60s, a great band called the Monkees had a television show,
the Prefab
and then the
Four.
Partridge Family,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so these guys gave you this different element, right? They had comedy, and they had a scripted show, and then they introduced their songs, and it was great because it added visuals to the music. Now, as you said, we're adding music to the visuals.
Yes.
Gotcha.
MTV was, you know, the time where people had never watched television would sit there in front of MTV and watch it for hours, right?
Days.
Because it was 3.5 minutes a pop.
Yeah.
Nobody would sit down, and the people that would refuse to watch a 60-minute television show would gladly watch 23-minute songs, which is still an hour, right?
Yep.
So your attention span is different.
And they covered all the genres, and it was taking the whole FM radio band into one channel.
Exactly. So, but now,
I'll forget now.
could you have a video of somebody, of a guitar player sitting under a tree singing to a girl? No,
they don't know.
not enough going on.
That was Herb
The tree would
Alpert.
have to explode.
That was Herb Alpert.
The tree would have to
Guys in
explode
Love with
into
You.
flames. Yeah.
The tree would have to explode.
The tree would have to explode.
The tree would have to either explode, or at the end of the video, the guitar player would have to kill her.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
something
exactly.
of that nature
It would have to be.
get everyone's.
It would transform into a chainsaw.
Yeah. So
There's some shock value there that unfortunately is quite disturbing today, because that's what people are looking for, the visual shock value. I think we've become quite numb to that. That's another story in itself.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, just kind of getting back to, you know, why the three of us are here is we are keeping music alive. And I'm currently playing with a band, one of my favorite all-time bands from the 60s. And they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that's the Love and Spoonful. Right?
Wow, nice.
We go out there, and I can assure you there's no spectacle. We're just on stage. We play the songs. People love them. People clap. And we go out afterwards into the lobby and, you know, say hello, meet and greet, and sign some autographs and have some photos taken. I obviously was not in the original band, you know, in 1964. And people just come up, and the first thing they say is, "Thank you so much for keeping this music alive."
Nice.
Because where else are you going to see it? You know,
That's true.
So I kind of feel like we're doing like a civic duty, you know, doing shows like this, like the three of us are doing right here, which is why I'm so appreciative of you guys contacting me, because.
Well, we thank you for that.
I mean, first of all,
we've been, you know, running into players, as I say, all bassists, great and small, and we all have the same passion, and we all have the same drive, and the paths and the experiences of others are certainly much more interesting and provocative and thought generating than, you know, hearing about the last 87 shows I had with nobody coming in a bar band.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's something that we're trying to get out. But like I said, when this all started, because Anthony and I would talk on the phone for hours on end about players like you, like something would just pop up, and it would be like, who was the bass player for Neil Diamond in 2014? Oh, that was Bill Cinque. Oh man, you know, that guy was really, really good. And if he was here, we would ask him, was he ever the victim of his producer? Did he ever not get to express himself? Did he ever get held back? Did he ever say, oh my God, that was the greatest bass line I ever cut, and we're not using it?
Yeah, I'm going to say I've been very fortunate. I know that those things exist. It happened to me on a very small scale with like, local independent records where I often said to the guy, why did you ask me to come in if you want me to sound like someone else? Why don't you just get the other guy? Why are you telling me what to play? I will give you a great bass story. And this is years ago. A good friend of mine, Michael Lloyd, a huge producer, actually, among other things, did the music for, oh my goodness, Dirty Dancing. It escaped me for a moment. But he produced everything from like the early, the teeny bopper records, like the Osmond Brothers and the Osmond Family and Leif Garrett and those kind of people, Sean Cassidy. And then he's still working today doing all kinds of stuff. I did a session with him and there was a lot of, kind of heavy cats in the studio. And I was playing bass and he said, he stops it and goes, all right, Bill, here's the deal. You're trying so hard to play a structured bass line. And he said it right in front of everybody. It was pretty funny. He goes, here's what I want you to do. Play with a pick. And I said, I don't really like playing with a pick. He said, I don't care. Just play with a pick and make believe you're the 14-year-old kid learning how to play a bass in the garage and just thrash it. And you don't have to play the same thing twice. And it doesn't have to be a bass line. Just go for it.
Hey, just to circle back, was he striking like a psychological wound of when you first picked up the bass when it got forced in your hands?
You know what? Maybe, but I think what he was saying was just loosen up and just go crazy.
Yeah, and it's what Anthony would say is play to the song.
Yeah, but I think at this point we didn't even know what the song was.
Even greater. Yeah, right. You're adding in.
So he just said, no, don't think so much. Just play like you're a 14-year-old kid. And we listened back and everybody started laughing because they went, it's perfect. Not that I was perfect, just that play with abandon. It's not always about structure and keys and notes and, just attack it,
what happens is you have this predicated sense of accomplishment of I know this, I know that, this would be the best thing here, this would be the best thing there, and the producer's looking for the exact opposite.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in the room with some really, pretty heavy session players, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to be the one to step outside the box, right? I'm going to play a G. I'm going to play the G. And he was like, no, just smash it around and have some fun. And it turned out great. And I always think back to that. It's like, I think it was Mark Twain who said, don't let your schooling get in the way of a good education. Don't overthink it. You learn stuff. That's fine. You don't have to use. He
seemed to know. I just pulled up his name, and the first thing I see is at age 20, he was the head of A&R at A&M Records.
Yeah.
And he signed Lou Rawls.
Yeah, Michael Lloyd. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that goes to him being a brilliant producer. He knows how to get the best out of a player. Peter Asher. I've done all kinds of stuff with Peter. He almost never told me what notes to play. If I overplayed a little bit, he'd say, "Oh, yeah."
Discovered by Michael Lloyd.
What's that?
Discovered by Michael Lloyd, 1965. He produced the hit
for
Peter
Lou
and
Rawls.
Gordon. No, Peter and Gordon.
I don't think I knew that one.
The internet and AI is an incredible tool.
Yeah.
I'm scrolling through it now, and there it is. He did tremendous things, but it was he produced blah 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 the Osmonds. I'm not going to get into it anymore, but there it is. Peter and Gordon.
Nice.
Sean Cassidy.
Greg, I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Please.
My brother just brought the mail in, so our Bass Brothers hoodies just arrived.
Oh, man.
These are our Bass Bros.
You are quick, my friend.
Look at this.
Why, thank you. Yes.
Congratulations.
This is our Blues Brothers adaptation in silhouette, and
I like it.
we've turned this into wearables.
Yeah,
Yes.
very nice. Very, very nice. Well done.
And thank you very much. And we're
Breaking
flattered that
news here on Case for Bass.
yes, we're flattered that Bill Cinque is the guest on our podcast as we feature the arrival of our Bass Brothers hoodie.
That's amazing.
So we have the Case for Bass. We have the Case for Bass website on the bottom. So it says caseforbase.com.
Launching very, very shortly.
Yep.
Will they be for sale?
Yes, they
Yes.
will.
Yes.
I assure you, I'll be one of your first customers.
Thank you.
When that goes up for
Thank you
sale,
very
I'm buying
much.
one. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Absolutely. And I'll wear it proudly.
Awesome. You rock. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We are now coming to an end of our awesome interview.
This is
with
Bill. You're
Cinque.
fantastic
Thank you very
talk.
much.
I learned so much from hearing other experiences that when I strap it on, it's like, wait a second, this is clicking in. This is clicking in. This is clicking in. And whether it's the first time or it's something I heard 20 years ago and remember now, it just builds what I'm learning on, because you're always growing as a player, right?
Sure,
Yes.
sure. Well, let me be really clear about this as we wrap up. Both Greg and Anthony, you guys are really important. You're doing really important work here, and I am genuinely honored to be here. I've had as much fun as anybody. This is my first time being on with you guys. I'm going to invite myself to this show, whether you like it or not. I want to come back. Let's do this again soon, because
Yes.
Absolutely.
this is worth doing, and I think people that will listen to this and see this will go, hey, you know what? These guys are just like me. I thought
Yes.
I didn't know anybody else was thinking like this. This is great. That's
what we talk
mission.
about on the phone after this.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We will have our post-mortem conversation, because we also love, look, we love this so much. And I think for the both of us, I can speak for both of us, that it was basically taking our conversations that we have anyway and invite everyone into the fold.
Right.
So it's something that we want to have live on forever, because AI, I don't want to see AI kill what we do. I really, really don't. And if anything, I'd rather AI just archive what we do as opposed to try to take over our
agreed.
position.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well,
Just
thank
serve
you
as
guys so
an
much. Thank you so much for having me on, and let's do this again soon.
I think Anthony has one last question.
Sure.
What would you tell aspiring musicians, aspiring bass players who want to get into the industry? Because look, you are a classic working musician. You've gotten here to the point where how many years later you're still here doing what you love to do and you're making a living at it?
I have a catchphrase that I said one time when I did a speaking engagement. I didn't realize how important this would be. I said it off the top of my head, and people have been reminding me. It was almost 15 years ago. Someone asked me that question in Nashville when I was doing this kind of symposium. They said, what advice would you have for young players coming in? And I said, show up on time and wear a clean shirt, right? Everybody laughed. And I sat there and said, let me tell you something. If you think you're going to make a good impression by showing up late to an audition or to a gig or to a rehearsal or to a session, you're wrong. When you show up late, you're wrong. There's no room for wiggle there. You're wrong. When I said the thing about a clean shirt, it reminded me of whatever gig you're doing. If you're doing a wedding gig, you're supposed to wear a jacket and tie or a tux or whatever it is. If you can't do that, then don't take the gig.
Okay.
You show up looking like you rolled out of bed, walking in with coffee stains, like you didn't care enough to look presentable, to be on stage in front of 50 people. I don't want you on my gig.
Okay.
I think some people get so tied up, some of the younger people get so tied up in how am I going to impress a record company? And I kind of have to say to them, you're light years from a record company right now. How about you just learn the songs and show up on time? That would be great.
Sure.
So that would be my sage advice, would be show up on time and wear a clean shirt, and let's start from there.
All right. Awesome. So we had to reverse it. Greg, you're back?
Yeah, I had a torsamide incident. I couldn't hold it in.
Oh, yes. Oh, by the way, Bill, we're both
Yeah.
heart dudes. I had heart failure.
I had a
in
transplant.
August, and Greg had a transplant. So
We have we have another show talking to heart disease survivors,
yes,
heart attacks, transplants, valve replacements.
Wow. That's
And-
intense. That's
and-
impressive.
And
Yeah.
it's the same kind of talk, but much different subject matter.
obviously.
And that
Mhm.
makes me the Bill Cinque of this interview. It's a
Yes.
K. And you know, I had a heart pump, I had a transplant, I had 2 open heart surgeries, you know, within a year. And
Wow.
yeah, I've been through it all.
Greg's been
and-
the ringer, and I'm
and-
a rookie, and my goal is to stay like that. My
Yeah,
goal is to,
I hear you.
Yeah, my
And in
goal is
case
to
for
stay-
bass, it's reversed because Anthony's our expert at the video streaming and the overseas bass playing, and I'm a hack. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
And,
you're good.
I know I'm good, so I could say that. And what we've done is we wanted to speak to players, bassists great and small, about that level of passion. And if you notice, we don't talk about playing, we don't talk about scales, we don't talk about
Yeah.
you know, all these
Right.
other things, and we talk about the nitty gritty and what's in your head.
Yes.
You know, because we all think it's the same thing, which we believe it is.
Yeah, well,
Yep.
I appreciate the call, and I'm glad we did this, and let's do it
And
again
you're always
soon.
welcome back.
Thank you guys so much.